some other crap. Well, it'll start streaming in 20 seconds then. Yeah, I guess I am interested in people's. It sounds like you were talking about some like research or whatever that you exchange. Did somebody share research with somebody
Yeah,
else?
there was some study about with respect to the regret rate among gender affirming care applicants. So everybody who asked for who visited the gender clinic was then followed for a period of like something like 15 or 20 years. I don't remember exactly how long. And regardless of whether they had gender affirming care or not, they were asked to rate not. And I believe these rates were then compared for those who did have a treatment and not have a treatment. And I believe the regret rate in that particular study of a pretty large sample size as well, thousands or maybe even tens of thousands, I don't remember exactly, was about 1% regret rate of gender affirming care. But there are also criticisms. Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not doubling me up. Yeah, I've heard that before, and that's I think one of the things that informs my views on this. But one thing that I think is kind of something I've been talking about with like Dale and User is that like what woke is doesn't seem to be really well defined at all. Like there's just no consistent definition of the word. So it's like it could be anything from thinking trans identity is legitimate or supporting trans rights to like um, having like people of color in certain forms of media or something like this. Like it's pretty kind of all over the place, it seems like.
It also seems to be a derogatory term that mostly used by opponents of, for example, gender affirming care and DEI, and it's I don't know if there is very many people who label themselves woke. I think there's many people who do subscribe to the views like gender affirming care is an effective treatment for gender dysphoria.
Yeah, I mean like well I try to like eschew identities generally speaking anyway. But just going based off of what other people say, I usually say like, yeah, you would probably consider me woke. And I'm usually right too. So it's again, it's kind of like, I don't know. I think if I had to like write the list, it's like I think systemic racism exists, and I think uh, that there is a patriarchy, and then I think that trans identity is legitimate, and that we should advocate for trans rights. So I think that's like the big four. I think like those three or four things are what I always understood it to. Yeah. Yeah, it is. This is the record button. I said it at the beginning of the thing, but thanks, Ragnar.
Yeah, I think the term is going to mean different things depending on who's using it, right?
Yeah.
Like, because there's a lot of people that just use it as a pejorative, and they're like trying to insult people by calling them woke.
Yeah, for sure. And it has like a long history. Like I was talking to usually the other day, and he was not aware that had it had been used for much longer than just the previous decade or even 2 decades. That it's really from much earlier in history.
Right. Didn't it start in like the 50s or something like that?
Yeah, I think like the
50s.
40s or the 50s. I think their retort was like, well, wasn't like Aristotle the first person to use it or something? Because I don't know. I guess it
It's
was.
a
Sorry, Leslie. You can go ahead.
it's a Christian concept.
Yeah, yeah, that too.
Yeah. I mean, being woke is waking up, seeing the light. A lot of ideologies take that kind of being hit by something afresh, getting it, take on that kind of event as you're in when you do that.
Yeah, or like Plato's cave. You can kind
Hmm.
of view that as waking up, the coming out of the cave. But and then and then it confuses me because it's like, okay, here's this view of what I have of like of what woke is, and then I remember hearing Peter Boghossian was talking to Nathan from Digital Gnosis, uh, and he kind of described what people generally view as woke, and then Peter was like, "Oh, that's not woke." But it was like what most people it was, and again, if you know Digital Gnosis, then you have a pretty good sense of what his stance is on things. But Peter Boghossian was saying that people who are woke don't do martial arts, and Nathan does a lot of martial arts. So I think Peter Boghossian had to kind of reconcile that with just like, you're not woke. So and I think, to be charitable in that context, what he was saying was like, you're not against free speech on campus, or you're not for stifling free speech on campus, which is like, okay, so is that woke then? It seems like it can be used by the same people, and kind of change depending on the circumstance. Yeah, because like in that context, I wouldn't. Then I would say, okay, fine. If that's what you're calling woke, then no, I'm not woke. I generally think speech should be free on campuses. I think, not that all of it should, but I definitely disagree with the way a lot of situations are handled on campuses in that regard. Uh,
You know
No,
what's
in the spirit of
you know what's interesting
yeah,
about the word.
we both we both waited just as long for each other. Okay, I'm gonna go quick now. In the spirit of what's recently gained a lot of attention in the SE community, like nonviolent communication, I would be interested in analyzing a bit why people care about discussing woke. Why is it important for those who, the likes of Peter Boghossian, who are fighting against wokeism, and also why is it important to those who are proposing the things that Peter Boghossian believes are woke, or in general, people who are fighting this culture war against wokeism. But we can also. It's just a suggestion to go there.
What were you gonna say, Leslie?
Well, I was thinking about the concept of wokeness, and it implies that other people aren't woke, right? It implies a separation between you and others. I'm woke, you're not. Or I used to be unwoke and now I'm woke. Like there was a state of sleeping.
Yeah,
So whatever that's worth, it's used to divide.
that's true. Yeah, and I guess also another connotation from that is that there are different levels. Like it seems like you could be more or less woke depending on what you're aware of. But yeah, it's like, Peter Boghossian views it as a mind virus, right? And people like him do. Uh, and so that's why they're concerned with it. I think and one of the things that I really kind of want to understand or get to the bottom of is, he views this ideology as having infiltrated expertise or professionals of the academic field. And I don't view it the way that he views it. I think it's happening for different reasons. And I think that's ultimately his concern. He views a lot of these things as like unscientific or not supported by the data. And so that's his issue, is he sees it as kind of eroding the integrity of academia. And then I think,
Well,
yeah.
but you're aware of his experiment,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, his publishing stings, yes.
So that's quite interesting. I mean, it is evidence that perhaps there isn't really a there. I mean, that's one interpretation of what he showed.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is why I would be interested in having a fuller discussion. I don't know that I'm interested in talking to Peter about this just because I don't think it would go well. But I'm interested in the studies that he's done because, again, so the knowledge that I'm working with is like, one, he's not the first person to conduct a publishing sting. And in fact, publishing stings have been done in nearly every field with similar results. And so it's like, so now do we just distrust all of, this? It's been done in the field of physics before. So it's been done in the hard sciences, and fraud is a very common occurrence in academia. Not it's not I don't want to like kind of make this thing overblown. It's not like absolutely everywhere, but my point is this issue of things that are less than credible making it kind of pass the scent tests is not new. He's not the first person to do it, and in fact, the details of his own study are that he was rejected a lot. He sent it out to a lot of places and was rejected in a lot of places. Now, it did get accepted in what I would consider one pretty credible journal. The other ones I don't consider. One other one I think is semi-credible, but the issue of some of these were open access journals, and we know the issues with open access journals. Like virtually anybody can create an open access journal, and so there are going to be issues there. This is not a high bar, and I haven't heard him talk about any of these things. So again, I would like to, I guess, hear him talk about it, though not have a conversation with him about it.
Is your goal to defend the woke movement or to understand Peter's or others' criticism of it, or to somehow purify SE? What's the goal?
In terms of SE, I don't have any goals. I like that SE is diverse, and if it doesn't remain diverse in some ways, then fine, so be it. Because I don't think you can force people to have opinions. But I like when I see diversity in the community. That's to me, that can be a good sign of some things. I am, as of right now, and the reason that it's important to me is because I am an advocate for like academic thought as somebody who works in academia, and as somebody who used to be a person who highly distrusted academia and science, and learning about the ways that different and various fields build knowledge and coming to have trust while obviously still understanding the nuance and flaws of the whole system as well. Seeing an issue in the public where the public really doesn't trust academia, or they don't know what academics think, and that is something I view as an issue. But I would also be fine if the that's not the only the only option. The other option is that Peter opens my eyes and shows me, exactly, kind of explains all my misgivings about these conclusions that he's drawn from what I view as pretty limited data and scope, and kind of gets rid of those misgivings, and then changes my mind, and then I'm like, oh, okay, so the soft sciences and the humanities are trash, and I will discard those in terms of my trust in their abilities to build knowledge, and just stick with the hard sciences.
Oh, wow. And you think that's what he's pushing? The idea that you can't trust these disciplines anymore.
Yes.
Interesting.
I mean, pretty openly. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
So this goes way beyond wokeism. This is a entire body of knowledge and expertise and scholarship that is not being respected, and you think it's permeating to the culture at large.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I even get, it's like people like Peter Boghossian or Jordan Peterson, and this part I deeply understand on a personal level. They have these grievances with academia, which in large part are legitimate grievances, in terms of the kind of ivory tower behavior, just some really just off-putting negative behavior. Though we're going to disagree about why that exists. That's something that I can get, but I think what happened, if I had to speculate, I don't want to say I know exactly what happened, but I feel like they were hurt by their institution or ones like it, and they are reacting emotionally in kind of a vendetta against these institutions because they were scorned by them. And it's like, as somebody who's been scorned in academia before, I get the feelings. I just don't think that the conclusions are correct.
Personally, I think it's a dangerous game and not fruitful to assign motives to actions.
Yeah,
We
that's
don't really
fair.
know. Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. But I guess part of the reason that I was saying is it was to try to validate. Part of it was accusatory, sure, and I'm fine disregarding that part. But the other part is, I know that they have negative emotions because they're open about this, so I don't have to speculate about that part, and I understand those negative emotions. So I guess that's really the important bits to me.
Well, we are in the postmodern era, right? Where we
Mm-hmm.
as cultures don't trust authority anymore. We don't trust institutions. We are skeptical on the whole of anything that smacks of authority. And then we have thought leaders that are propagating that even more in all arenas, in academic arenas, in political arenas, in, you know, just podcast arenas. And it seems to actually go across different ideologies. It seems so prevalent that almost everybody has a smattering of it. And, and what you're talking about just seems to be one aspect of that phenomena.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that, and that's the other thing that you can kind of understand too, right? Is like it's good to have like a healthy amount of skepticism, especially when we're talking about authority, right? Like that's
Sure.
something that we need. But I think you can do it to kind of your own detriment. It's like now we're living in an age where we haven't made much progress in people believing certain scientific topics. In fact, they've regressed in some of those things. In terms of, like, if you look at the rates of flat earthers, they're still pretty low, but they've grown. They've grown in numbers and percentage. And then we talk about climate change, so these are pretty big issues in my mind. And again, it could be wrong, and I'm open to it, but just I don't see a reason I haven't been convinced of any like credible, like a large amount of data or like meta studies show. And in fact, that's kind of my other issue here, is that these things have been studied. like we've done like analyses and evaluations of academic literature, and there are certainly differences and considerations, but nothing like what Peter, and he doesn't even seem to be aware of those studies, or at least he's never brought them up, and they would seem significant to what he's talking about. So that's, again, another sort of weird thing to me, but maybe there's studies he knows of, right, that I haven't heard of. So I'm kind of interested in it for that reason too.
I feel like there's three issues intertwined here. One is wokeism or distrust or public distrust at large. And then there's SE. And at one point you said you weren't interested, but the title of your web podcast is SE Woke. So
yeah,
I'm not quite sure what you're trying to focus on.
Well, that is, I guess, partly just one of those clickbait things, but there is still that conversation. Like,
Right.
like Peter Boghossian, from what my current understanding, and again, I'm not talking to him directly, so I'm trying to like qualify everything that I say, but he seems to think that SC has been infiltrated, like, and like, I'm being deliberate in my use of the word infiltrate here, that SC has infiltrated, or that wokeism has infiltrated SE.
So he is not of the mind that you are, that it's good to have diversity in SE.
I don't know his specific stance on whether or not it's good or bad, but given what he thinks about wokeism, my guess would be that he would say that it's not good.
Yeah, I can't help be reminded of the whole democracy debate, right? If democracy is a method, democracy is an ideal, and it doesn't have a point of view. It doesn't say guns are bad, guns are good. It just says, let's be able to talk about it. Let's put it under a law structure. And I would say the same thing with SE. It's not, this is bad or that's bad. It's just, let's be able to talk about it in a structured way.
Yeah, exactly.
And as long as that's the ideal, it doesn't matter. All the rest is somebody's opinion. And SE did start out as a way to make atheists. So, if it has that legacy of trying to change somebody's point of view to a particular way, then I thought it shed that, and it tried to be more of a vehicle for conversation and exploration of epistemologies.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
That's the wokeism he's talking about.
Oh, can you repeat that? Because I think that was important. Red.
I said maybe that's the wokeism that he's talking about.
Yeah.
That when he created SC, like, you just kind of have to look at the mind of the creator. He sees, if you see how, I never read how to read or how to create atheists, or a manual for creating atheists, but even though it sounded like he was compassionate towards, he was still condescending about certain mindsets, the conspiracy theorists, the the religious person, and all of that. And if he see, I would say that he would put the woke activists into the same category. So if he sees people coming into SE and, changing it, it addresses what he probably sees as a fundamental aspect of SE. I don't know. It's like I've never heard him say anything about wokeism infiltrating it, maybe because I don't pay attention to him, but that could be the source of it.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm trying to be charitable and qualify here. I think I heard it from Reed, but maybe I need to double check with him. So kind of take what I said there with a grain of salt. So it wasn't even me hearing it; it was me listening to somebody that's close to Peter and getting that impression from them. So it was a secondhand source. But yeah, and it's like if that's the only thing that I heard him talk about, we would be in complete agreement, you know? Like if the only thing that I heard Peter talk about in regards to this issue was like, he defined woke strictly as wanting to shut down other points of view and only that, and not talk about controversial topics, then I would say, yeah, that's wrong, and we're on the same page. It's the fact that whenever he's talking about woke, I don't hear him just talking about that. He's talking about studies related to racial discrimination or trans people, some of these things. So,
Right. So it's problematic when you have a person who's known for this particular branch of, I don't know what you want to call it, persuasion or conversation, espousing a particular point of view in relationship to SE. Therefore, it has it has a bigger impact.
yeah. Yeah, and I've kind of taken it that there are people in the community that have left or that are considering leaving because that aspect of it.
Right.
And so to me
I
that
get you.
yeah, that kind of begs a solution. Or, if SE is going to uh survive, I guess. Maybe it'll survive despite, but certainly doesn't help that SE goes through these favors. Like it seems to go through these phases of hemorrhaging people, and then it'll get new ones. But I don't think this is the first time it's happened. It seems like there are like a new set of people every 2 or 3 years.
I think there's a tension that nobody's really acknowledging, and that it when you have it's growing pains to some extent. But when you have a light group of people and it gets infiltrated or adopted by a larger group, it's very difficult to keep the brand pure, if you will, unless you're going to change the brand to something that's easier to grasp for everyone, right? Unless you make it more about the method than about a particular point of view. Like, for example, suppose a bunch of flat earthers joined the group. Would people object to that? Would people be like, as long as they didn't press their point of view in conversations and doing SC sessions, would that be egregious? So is the voice going to, is the brand going to stand for we're critical thinkers, or is the brand going to stand for we are conversational discoverers of epistemology? That was awkwardly said, but you get the idea.
Yeah, see, I think that would be interesting as hell if flat earthers just started to join the community and do SE. I think that would be awesome, you know.
There you go.
Yeah. But and again, I think and the reason that I wanted to talk about this, and I'll probably do these on more days, is because I want to know what people think, and I want to have a conversation about, I like talking about the actual information, so I'm interested in the studies. And sometimes this topic will randomly come up, and I'm not always able to speak, but I can listen, and I'm kind of frustrated because it seems like studies aren't brought up as much. It seems like people kind of go with their gut on some things or intuitions.
Studies on what?
Well, like one thing would be like the thing that I've heard, and again, this is something that I could ultimately be wrong about, but I've heard people talk about like trans people in bathrooms, right?
Well, let me stop you for a second. Are you trying to argue the point instead of arguing the method? I mean, now,
Arguing the
right? So if the flat earth, we're not, the goal is not to figure out what's correct or not.
Oh, well, no, I am interested in both. I'm interested in both. I mean, like, I especially within the SE community, is people that I kind of value, that I do value as critical thinkers. I'm interested in everybody's thoughts in this community on the topic, because if anybody is going to have a chance of persuading me away from something that could be wrong, it's probably this community, only second to like people in the academic community, which they're not going to do because they tend to agree with those things.
Right. But you can't, this is my concern. You can't mix the conversations. If you're having a conversation about democracy and the right of free speech, you can't mix that with the conversation about we should have guns excluded in schools, because you're missing an issue, a particular issue with the concept of everybody having the right to speak. Do you see how those are two different things?
Yeah.
And it gets confusing. And that's your problem with Peter. It gets confusing when somebody's talking about a particular issue and SE at the same time. So it's fine if you talk about either, but you have to separate them.
No.
That's my advice.
Well, to be clear, my main issue with Peter Boghossian is his attitude. I don't care that he talks about wokeism. I don't care that he uses SE to. I don't care that he has an agenda. I don't care that he has a perspective, or what's the word that everybody uses when we're talking about this? Kind of a mission or goal. My issue is his attitude. His attitude is not SE to me. But I still understand what you're saying. That's a little bit beside the point. But just to be clear about what my actual issue is, it's not that he's talking about wokeism and he's talking about SE. Or that he's using SE, or not using SE, but trying to use SE, or labeling things SE in order to.
Your issue is, say it once more.
That he is labeling his material SE while essentially not having the attitude of an SEer, or what I view as the attitude of an SEer.
I don't know what other people heard, but I heard you say X is true and X is false at the same time. Are you concerned about SE? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And you're concerned that Peter is misrepresenting SE?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Or how do we feel about it? Yeah, I think the two things that I kind of want to talk about Willow is just an open conversation about woke within the community, because it's like I hear it pop up every once in a while, but it's kind of sparse and disjointed. But also to talk about kind of its relationship to SE, if any.
What do you? I guess one of the interesting things about this term woke is that it's kind of not not very consistently defined. I think in the minds of people that talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have a definition that you work with?
Yeah, well, my definition was people who think systemic racism is a thing, that patriarchy is a thing, that trans identity is legitimate, and advocate for trans rights. Would be how I currently understand it, but I do agree with you. There is no, like, people do not use it in the same way, and they even seem to kind of sometimes even switch mid-conversation, from my understanding.
So I feel like for me, I've been trying to understand this a little. I feel like it's really difficult because in many ways I'm very sympathetic to a lot of the ideas that are espoused by people that would be labeled woke. But at the same time, I'm also really concerned about some of the kind of crazy things that are done also under that label. And I guess this is generally speaking a problem with labels, just like we have a difficulty with the problem with the label of SE being somewhat controlled by the perception of Peter and what Peter does under the rubric of SE. There are lots of people that might be trying to do really good and worthwhile, valuable things under the label, which will be labeled woke. And then they also get sort of unfortunately bundled in with all of the crazy people who are doing very strange and disruptive things under the label woke. So it is a problem with labels, I'd say. It's not ideal. But I think my personal understanding of what I think woke is changed when I understood it just to be more functionally about power dynamics and power differentials. To me, I think underlying the agenda of all of the woke narratives, policies, ideas is the idea of power differentials and the idea that power differentials need to be eradicated. And I think once you understand it as only that's it, that's the whole thing. Like that to me is the entire underlying principle. All of these other principles, i.e. how they feel about trans issues, how they feel about racial issues, how they feel about Israel-Palestine, how they feel about all of these things, they're derived from their base principle of power differentials. And where they see there being a difference in power, they will want to address that and call it out and try to disrupt it. And fight for the underdog and disrupt the positions of people in the positions of or who have access to power. And I think in some people they're more aware of that underlying principle than others. So there are many people might be espousing the woke idea who are not fully aware of that underlying ideology or ideological perspective. And so they're kind of championing the causes, but not maybe as connected to the underlying philosophy. And there are lots of people that are going to be motivated who really do understand that underlying philosophy, I suspect. And for them, that philosophy has become more of an ideological position, and it becomes the foundation for their worldview. Does that sound? I would be open to a critique of that. It's not entirely well formed in my head, so.
I really like it. To tell you the truth, I really like it. I just think there's just to be a little bit more precise. It has to do with the abuse of power dynamics in the role of oppression and so forth. So, like, even if you go back to the original wokeism, which was just mainly a Black American thing, it was the fact for people to wake up to the reality of systemic racism and the oppression of the Black people in America. There's actually an HBO series called Woke, featuring that Black guy from Wilson from the New Girl, and it's like I think that show is like the epitome of actually what woke was meant to be, is because Wilson plays a character that is Black in America, but is comfortable. He has a good job. He doesn't see the racism around him. His friends tell him about systemic racism. He's like, what are you talking about? He has lots of friends and stuff like that. And then one day he has a run-in with the police. And then because of this run-in with the police, he wakes up and starts seeing everything that he is, I don't know, maybe been blocking out or something like that. So like that's the origin of the word woke, is that you're waking up. And it is waking up to the power, the misuse of the power dynamics. And I really like that, because if you follow that line of reasoning, then all the issues that are in the news today fall right into place under that rubric, as you called it, of sticking up for the underdog. See, the only problem is with any kind of ideology, you know what they say: if the witch hunter doesn't find a witch, he makes one. And sometimes I think that I see that a lot, but that's neither here nor there. But
Yeah. Hey, Dale, by the way, kind of one of the people I wanted to talk to about this anyway, so I'm glad you're here. But yeah, I do, with what Will was saying, I agree with you, except for one thing, which would be that it is necessarily the desire, it's necessarily the attempt to destroy any power structures or power dynamics, because some would say that that's impossible, right? In fact, many might.
Well, the underlying ideal seems to be that power differentials are inherently bad.
Yes.
And I don't agree with that position. I don't think power differentials are inherently bad.
Yeah.
But I think that if you did hold that position, if you'd really truly believe, well, because one of the things that, for example, I was struggling to understand was the kind of huge support by the, again, it's very difficult to differentiate between people with just left-leaning views and extreme left-leaning views, and where the demarcation between those people and woke is. But let's just say, people on the left supporting the Palestinian position in the Israeli-Palestine situation. And it seems kind of strange to me that a group of people so passionately and vehemently in support of, say, gay rights and women's liberation and empowerment and emancipation would support the Palestinians in anything, really, frankly, because the Palestinians are functionally pushing for a more fundamental Muslim position, and that seems antithetical to the ambitions of what a lot of people under the woke rubric would stand for and would say that they stand for. But then the reason why it seems is because the left seem to feel that Palestine is the underdog here, being oppressed by the Western proxy, which is Israel. And so they see it as something akin to, what's it called? I've completely forgotten the word. Imperialism. It's something akin to imperialism, and it's just the West projecting power into the Middle East where it doesn't belong. And so they see the West Israel as functionally proxy for the West, and as such, it's inheriting all of that sort of power, and that's oppressing the Palestinian people. And that's literally all they care about. They care about this power differential, and so that's what they're focusing on, it seems. And then, like, to counter to that, of course, one of the difficulties with the woke is that all the woke positions is like, a lot of these positions are really worth paying attention to. So there's a lot of baby that gets thrown out in the bathwater if we're not careful. And one of the things that I'm genuinely concerned about is that the irrationalities of the woke position seem to be pushing people into an anti-woke mindset. I mean, hell, I could quite happily say that I'm in a very anti-woke mindset these days. But an anti-woke mindset should not be allowed to transition into anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-women mindset. That's not the same. And I fear that the right is using this as a position to leverage some kind of seemingly more egregious narratives that they probably wouldn't have been feeling brave enough to push, but because the left has been pushing quite so hard in recent times, it seems like the right is now seeing an opportunity to push back and, let's say, over course correct. But there is there's a more modern, I think there's a more moderate version of this sort of concern about the sort of the woke position, and I think it's to do with just how fast it's pushing and how quickly it's pushing. It wants changed immediately. It's like a sort of petulant child. It demands change immediately, and it doesn't really have much of a strategy for what that change needs to be specifically. Well, it knows what the change needs to be. It doesn't care about the repercussions, and it hasn't really put any thought into it, how to bring it about. It just demands that the change is made. And there's a wonderful Dr. Seuss quote, which I really like, that seems to correlate really nicely here. And the quote is, "They say I'm old-fashioned and I live in the past, but sometimes I think that progress progresses too fast." And I think that sentiment of progressing too fast seems to me to be the sort of aches and pains that are being felt by society as the woke sort of left is pushing too quickly towards a specific goal, without much of a care for the implications of and repercussions of such a drastic push.
Well, in this conversation, I feel that it always gets very nebulous. They want this, and so forth. Do you have any examples? Like, do you know any specific policies, any rules, any law changes, or anything like that you think they're going too far, and that it's hurting their cause?
I think that's hurting what cause? Sorry.
That's hurting the woke
Well,
movement.
It's just going too far. It's like I always like whenever listening to these anti-woke conversations. I listen to a lot of them. Over at Clubhouse. I think that was basically where the birth of it was for my sphere of influence, right? Because that's where Peter Boghossian first got on, and you had the Weinstein brothers kicking in, and you had that who was that guy that he's a reporter from humanism.org that contributes to I can't remember his name. He just debated someone too about trans rights. Someone that we all know, Nathan. Anyways, it doesn't matter who he is, but like it's always very nebulous. It's almost like describing a boogeyman. You never want to say what the boogeyman actually looks like, but you just want to describe the fear that he instills. So, because when I've talked to woke people, they've had very distinct demands. Some that I think are crazy was like defund the police, right? Although I don't think that was entirely a woke thing. But trans rights, or allowing like the bathroom issue, I think would be a woke issue that is very a very clear thing. But other than the bathroom thing, I never really hear any concrete explanation or descriptions of what people are fighting against. Like, what is it the woke people are doing?
Yeah, so I think DEI would be a good example of this, how DEI is now transitioned from university space into corporate space through the setting up and establishment of diversity, equity, and inclusion groups and activist groups within large organizations designed to promote particular agendas and narratives within the corporate structure, and also to mandate certain behavioral changes. So this can be anything from dating policies within the company, mechanics of interactions between people, to promotion quotas, and making sure that certain people are represented more than they are necessarily deserving of particular roles. This sort of narrative used to be referred to as tokenism, and it used to be looked down on as a kind of lip service response to disparities in racial representation, and the idea that you would have a couple of people of color on your board of directors in order to just show that you're not full of white men, was seen as gross and very much not progressive. But then suddenly that seems to have changed now, and it's all about taking a photograph of your board of directors and making sure that there are as many female, black, and Hispanic, and members of this board, and this has suddenly become very popular in the modern moment. Like, this is worthy of the applause, and I think that's a really dangerous thing to do. For example, because I suspect what it does is it breeds some suspicion that these people are not there for reasons of talent and skill, whereas they absolutely might be. There's no reason to know that they're not. But if you are operating in a company that is operating such policies, there might be reasonable reason for you to be a bit uncertain as to why you're not getting promoted over somebody else, and think negatively. And this kind of, I think this is rather an insipid thing that starts to breed in more, let's say, right-wing feelings in a population that might otherwise not have them.
Yeah, I understand, going back to some of the things that you were saying, Will, and even Red, like there are these claims made by people that are rightly considered woke, or things that happen that muddy the waters and aren't at all good for some of the things that woke people are concerned about. But we've talked about this before. One is I try to resist labels where I can, while also not being naive about the fact that I fall into certain groups. But my issue is that this seems to be a bigger concern for the woke group than a lot of other movements that have had historically similar issues, but nobody's concerned about them. Like, I could have been talking about Malcolm X during the civil rights movement, or Marcus Garvey at an earlier date. Like, I can talk about these problematic figures, this crazy idea that all black people should go back to Africa. To me, none of it would be amazing to me if there was an organization that didn't have some people saying, crazy, illogical things. Like, that just comes with the territory of any large group of people, is that some of them are going to say and do egregious things, and that this doesn't need
That's
to.
always true.
Yeah, and I don't. And again, that doesn't mean we can't criticize the aspects of it that we're seeing and say, like, we're not for that. Like, I would say, like, defund the police thing, right? It's just like, I don't think that's a good idea, right? I'm still open to being persuaded, by the way, but as far as I understand and what I've heard, I have not heard anything good about that. So I can look at that and be like, yes, there might be woke people saying that. I'm not hearing any convincing arguments that should happen.
So I think the defund the police thing was an interesting thing, because I don't think they, for the most part, were actually calling for the police to be defunded, or at least the vast majority didn't understand the slogan "defund the police" to mean that the police should be fully decommissioned. That's what I'm looking for. So I don't think that's what they wanted. What they seemed to be suggesting was that they wanted some kind of reduction in police funding and a transference of those funds into programs that would be supportive of people's mental health and well-being, and in order to sort of provide a better level of service from the police than was currently being seen. Although as an awful lot of as an awful lot of these kinds of defund the police marches were surrounding heinous crimes or moments in police brutality, it was pretty much probably. I mean, there's probably a certain percentage of that crowd that genuinely did think that this was defund the police. We don't want the police. The police are too egregious a thing to exist, and we want to get rid of them entirely. But in underlying the principle of the group's sort of, I guess, leadership, if that is even meaningful here, it was a more sort of rational idea, although I don't think that even the more rational idea was all that well thought through. And then, of course, it depended on who you talk to, exactly what the details were there. But I think like there are. I mean, a better representation of this sort of thing might be something like 8 Count Wait, which was a much more sort of focused, but similar sentiment thing, where they were looking to actually have 8 specific legal changes implemented across the country, which included, a requirement for police to de-escalate and a few other things. I can't remember what they were, but 8 Can't Wait is certainly a better representation of these ideas. But specifically, like, this idea of like defunding the police makes sense again in the rubric of your power differentials need to be destroyed, right? And the police are empowered citizens operating within our societies. So even beyond the George Floyd killing and other egregious acts of racially motivated or seemingly racially motivated violence by the police, there is still an underlying problem that these groups are going to have with something like the police, because functionally they have power, and these groups' underlying principle is that power shouldn't exist in society at all.
Well, I don't know, that's still kind of, maybe I don't know. It just, but the thing is, I just, that idea of destroying all power differential just sounds ridiculous to me, because you said, it's an impossible thing. So I have a hard problem believing that a rational human being would think that that is even possible. That just, so it kind of, I'm like, does he really want that, or is it the misuse of the power differential is what they have a problem with? Police corruption, government government oppression, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't like. Well, some of them are anarchists, I've run into tons of those. There's a very small core, and I think with any movement that you have on any political spectrum, you're always going to have the extremists, and the extremists are always going to be the representatives for the movement, because they're the ones that the media and the public are going to pay attention to, right? So it's like a lot of the individuals that I've talked to, like that defund the police thing you said was, yeah, that's exactly what I heard. I haven't heard anyone say that we should disband the police completely. It's always been that, listen, police budgets keep on rising, but the money is being used for the militarization of the police. We need to stop spending all this money on tanks and body armor and heavy assault weaponry and riot gear and all of this stuff, and start funding things like training police properly for de-escalation. How about having American police at least meet the minimum requirements that the rest of the world put their police to? I was looking at the hours of training required, and everywhere is roughly around the same, which I think is around 2,000 hours of training. Some are even 4,000 hours of training. The US is as little as 400 hours of training to be a police. So changing things like that, these were the things that the messages I was hearing. But in the news, when I listen to the news, or if I'm on Twitter, or if I'm in Discord listening to people yell back and forth, it's always the extreme message that I hear. It's never the common sense objections and solutions that I'm actually hearing when I talk to individuals.
So maybe okay. First of all, you can never say all of any group, right? Because there's always an exception, and the moment somebody finds an exception, they're going to say, but this guy said something different, right? So I'm pretty sure we can't even say that all atheists don't believe in God, even though it would be tautological to be an atheist and believe in God. Let's just say there might be someone out there that might claim such a thing, right? And so somebody, there's an atheist out there that still believes in God. So it's really difficult. But I think specifically within regards to this movement, or at least the people that seem to belong to a sort of woke ideological movement, or one that would be labeled woke, I think it's even more difficult to say all when it comes down to specifically solutions. What they seem to be very motivated by is identifying the problems of society, and they seem to be a lot less consistent when you talk about what those solutions actually might be to those problems. So I think this makes it very difficult to clearly identify what it is that they're asking for. I think it's much easier to understand, again, through the idea of, let's say, if it's not their asserted goal, it's certainly their motivating intuition, which is that power differentials need to be destroyed. It is they dislike power differentials. They dislike this. They strongly correlate it to a sense of unfairness, and they really want to destroy anything that seems like it's unfair. And so I think whilst I would agree that the exact nature of the solutions that are being called for are not clear. I think the underlying intuition still remains for most of the people that would be labeled woke.
Yeah, I think especially the pointing out a problem issue, because that tends to be what everyone does, right? Like how I do it all the time, where I love pointing out problems, and it's not my issue to come up with the solutions. I'm just pointing out the problems, and so that's because it's easy.
Well, in some ways, it kind of this is partly why, well, not obviously the main reason, but it's partly why a lot of this sort of seems to sit within a communist narrative. Marx's Communist Manifesto was not so much a solution to problems as a critique of capitalism. It's just, it seems to be suggesting, hey, here are all the problems with capitalism. Let's solve those problems in unspecified, non-specific ways, but we'll figure that out later, and then there'll be a glorious utopia. This seems to be a similar sort of narrative that seems to exist in the sort of more microcosmic or let's say more fractured space of these sort of general woke ideas. Hey, it's enough to notice that there's a problem, that we don't like it, and there's a power differential, we don't like it. We're going to call it out. We're going to march. We're going to all be able to shout that Black Lives Matter. We're going to all be able to shout that to defund the police. We're all going to be able to get behind the idea that trans people must be protected, and trans identities are remarkable and special and need to be celebrated in society. We can all get behind these things. When it comes to specific policies, it becomes a lot less clear.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that too. And if that's where the discussion was, and first of all, I don't mind, going back to just SE a little bit. I do want to reiterate that I don't have problems with people in the SE community holding certain views. I have problems with them, obviously, as individuals holding the views, but not being an SEer. And I think diversity is a good thing within the community. I agree that in terms of policy, if that was where the disagreements were, right, just on the policy part, then I don't think we would be having the issues that we're having.
I would really be happy to say that none of this has got anything to do with SE, and I think anybody practicing SE should be as impartial as possible when interrogating and exploring another person's position. Exploring another person's position.
Yeah.
I really just don't think any of this is, having these conversations, maybe even on the SE server, might even be problematic in some sense, because it seems like the community is an agendaed community, and I don't think the community neither is nor should be an agendaed community. I think this is the problem with Peter. It's not really that he has views on these issues that we might not agree with, or maybe we do. It's the fact that he's an individual, and the problem with the SE community is it shouldn't be here to champion an individual's position.
Yeah.
It's here to encourage everybody to explore those positions. And I think, no matter what Peter thought, I think it's going to feel, I mean, I guess maybe we could look at this as a way of like differentiating. One of the distinctions it seems to be between Anthony and Peter is Peter seems much more willing to be overt in his representations of his ideals, right? He's much more willing to say strongly what he thinks about certain issues. And Anthony is much more, I'm going to say, represents himself with much more intellectual humility, especially in regards to controversial topics. I think he was much stronger on the idea of religiosity. He's much more willing, I think, to say that he personally doesn't believe in God, but he's always been, when talking to people, he's always been charitable, extremely good faith and charitable, exactly. Whereas Peter, of course, isn't. So his views seem to come across much more strongly, much more overtly, and that's a problem, because it now seems like SE is in some way about representing your views and presenting your views, because people's example of it will be Peter. And it isn't, and it shouldn't be seen as that. And I think it's completely wrong. And I think we would do much better if Peter was less opinionated about anything. And then he might be a better example of SE in general, but at least what I think the community believes is important about SE.
I can see where you're coming from with that. Like it is kind of, because if you have I guess it's always going to depend, just kind of like Pinewood pointed out in one of these rooms. He pointed out that, you know, it's not that Peter has an opinion. It's the opinion that he's holding that he sees the problem with. He's like, if Peter would have been doing everything he's doing right now, except for change the trans and the anti woke bit with atheism and conspiracy theories, that none of this would have shown up. And I kind of agree with him on that.
Who is this? Sorry, I missed who you were saying this was.
Pine Creek.
Oh, okay.
I sort of disagree with that, because I think
that's neither here or there. That opinion is kind of what I like. So like, because I kind of agree with the idea that I don't think it's a problem if the SEers express their opinion. This idea of neutrality, I've never been behind when it comes to SE, because I think it is entirely possible to express your opinion, and also achieve what SE is trying to achieve. It just takes a little bit more finesse, a finesse I've never been able to build up. But I've seen people, I in other conversations, not doing SE, just people on other servers talking, that have expressed their opinion and then went on and talked to someone and investigated someone else's beliefs that are of the opposite belief. So I think it's entirely possible to do. But also, I think it's this desire for neutrality that has caused a lot of problems for SEers. That's where all these manipulation charges have been thrown at it. We have a member in here, I Slam Hands, who has expressed a concern of motivated reasoning and manipulation of SE, which we've all heard before. We've probably heard for the last 2 years. But like, I talked to a guy last night. This wasn't about SE, but we were talking about books. And he was saying that he expressed a problem with a book recommendation. And his problem, what it boiled down to after we talked for a few hours, is that this lady, the author, was just kind of reporting what was trying to be neutral. She was presenting both sides. She wasn't moralizing either sides or nothing like that. And he's like, I'm suspicious of that. And then we went on to talk about other books where people were strongly expressing their opinion. Actually, the whole purpose of the book was to convince people to take certain actions. And he's like, I like that. He goes, because when we're human beings, we all have our opinions. We love expressing our opinions. We love convincing other people to side with us and to do the actions that we want them to do. So whenever you have someone that seems to be going out of their way not to show, not to convince you of something, not to express their beliefs, you think they're hiding something. What are they hiding? And that's what the problem he had with the book. He felt like she was hiding something or protecting herself from something by not expressing her opinions and stuff like that. And after the talking to the guy, I actually can really see his point.
So I would say, like, from an SE perspective, I think there are 3 key components that we should maintain. One is the principle of charity. I think is absolutely critical. I think also, and this is super important, I think we should all meet all claims equally. So I think regardless of what the claim is, we should address it with the same level of attention and focus and encourage people to reflect. And then the third thing is, I think we should absolutely be focusing on an epistemology. So we shouldn't really be focusing on whether we agree with their position or not, so much as we want them to reflect on their epistemology. We want them to reflect on the reason why they hold the position that they hold. And I think if you're doing those 3 things, you're going to seem like you're being neutral. You're going to be you may even be criticized for being sneaky or hiding your intent in some way, but I think I think we've seen just so many examples now of this being done well. that are, so for example, if somebody asks, what do you think? Say, hey, look, can I answer that question? I'll happily answer it, but let's do it at the end, and allowed the conversation to move forward without the person feeling attacked or feeling, I think if we can do those three things, to be charitable, to meet all claims equally, and to focus on the epistemology, then I would be more than happy for anybody to have whatever views that they want to have and hold. But I don't think they're doing SE if they're not charitable. I don't think they're doing SE if they treat some claims differently to others, i.e., they'd be happy for somebody to have poor reasons if they agree with the position. And I think if they're not focusing on the epistemology, then I suspect that they're not, not doing SE. So I don't know. That to me would be the three things that I think are pretty important.
Oh yeah, I would agree. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't talking about SE. I was more addressing that little that comment that you made about maybe this conversation shouldn't be happening on the SE. Like it sounded like I took that to sound like the SC server shouldn't even look like that. We are people that express our opinions, that we should be hiding all these things. Because if we get too many woke people in the server at once, people are going to accuse SC of being woke. Or if we get too many right wings in the server, then we're going to be accused of being right. That's what I was more addressing as like kind of the community aspect. It's like, I think that we can make it quite clear that once you flip that SE switch to on, then yeah, neutrality. I think you're completely right about what you said, that if you follow these steps, you almost have to take it from a neutral stance, because you're not talking about the you're not talking about the SE, you're talking about the interlocutor, right? Now that question, like when someone asks you what you think, I don't know, I'll gladly answer that question later. I've always got a feeling about that. It just didn't seem natural. It seemed kind of used car salesy, right? Like I think that you would be able, if someone really wants to know your opinion on it, then you can either outright go, well, listen, this is actually like kind of a structured thing, SE, and I'm just trying to keep the focus on you because I'm really trying to understand, or there's a purpose to this whole process, and I wanted to stick to that purpose. Or you just answer the question. You can just answer the question, go like, listen, yeah, I don't agree with you, right? I don't think that means what you think it means, or I don't come to the same conclusion, but like maybe you can convince me, or maybe like I just want to keep on listening because I want to see how you came to it. Maybe I'm missing something, that gives you a chance to build this bridge that, what do they call it? The mirroring thing, where you can show that, hey, we are looking for openness of investigation, and that if they see it in you, that's going to help them do it themselves. If they think that you're hiding something or trying to hide something, then I think that may close them down. I don't know. This may be entirely a case to case basis. But whenever I've seen it like a ton, like whenever I listen to SE, especially outside of the SC safe walls, like over on the PNR, or they did some SE over on the ACD and stuff like that. And I saw that, oh, well, I'll answer your question later thing. It just, it didn't feel right. It felt like the guy was hiding something.
I was just about to say, Honest Ape, I don't want to hijack your live stream.
No, you're okay. It's my stuff is lagging, and I have no idea why. But I've been troubleshooting anyway, so
no problem.
But
Well,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you're all right.
No, you go. Okay, well,
sorry, dude, I'm sorry for that. I didn't know we were streaming. I thought this was just a conversation.
Oh no, you are completely all right. It's I guess I do have to post it regularly in the chat then. But yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to listen to some of what you were saying, but I was focused on the stream. I don't know why it's acting the way that it is, but so I guess one of you talk for a while again, and then I'll get my tenor again.
Sure. Well, I'll happily address Red's point. So yeah, like, have you done much SE in the wild, Red?
Well, I don't do SE. Whenever I talk to people, I try to institute a lot of the tools of the SE bag. I don't always do it perfectly, but no, I don't specifically do SE, though I've I've been around for how long? So I've listened to 1.5 million conversations, and like, especially when I've seen it like in the wild, like when they're doing SE over.
That wasn't trying to be a gotcha question. It was more because I know you've been around for a long time on the community, and we've spoken many times before. But I guess it never occurred to me to know whether or not you'd actually ever gone out and tried to do SE with people. I think the reason I asked that question is I actually do think that there's a tremendous amount of value to asking the questions whilst maintaining as much neutrality as possible in the eye of the interlocutor. Sorry, your conversation partner. I hate the interlocutor terminology. Your conversation partner, like, I think if you can remain neutral, I think it really does come with benefits. I think the moment you tip your hat, no matter how open you're being with the person, no matter how friendly and how good the rapport is, if you hold a diametrically opposed position to the one they're espousing, they're immediately going to start changing the nature of their answers. They're immediately going to start being a little bit more defensive, and a little bit less focused. They're going to be more focused on addressing their points to you. And they obviously they don't really know you, but they're going to be using your view as a proxy for the sort of person you are, and they're not going to be doing the thing that we want them to, which is introspection, to reflect on their own positions. And I think it's really interesting to see if you're having a non-SE conversation and you're just using some of the tools in the toolkit, like then go for it. Whatever works for you, whatever feels right in the moment, I would say. But I think if you want to genuinely be doing an SE conversation where you're getting that person to really reflect on their position, I genuinely do believe it has benefits.
Yeah, I think maybe that does influence because I don't do actual SE. Like, I don't do the structured, hey, let's sit down and do SE. I don't record myself. I don't do podcasts. I don't do stage events or anything like that, right? I do personal conversations. And because personal conversations are a give and take, it's kind of like, usually if you sit down in a conversation with someone and all you do is talk about yourself, those conversations usually don't go very long, right? They don't entertain people very long. People don't want to be in them very long unless they are really interested in you, right? But it is a give and take, They tell you a little about them, you tell them a little about you. It's getting to know each other, and so forth. And that, like,